Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Nisha Mehta will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
This show is sponsored by Set for Life Insurance, the ultimate client experience in the insurance industry. Are you looking for the perfect insurance coverage that suits your needs? Founded in 1993 by President Jamie K. Fleischner, Set for Life Insurance specializes in individual life, disability, and long-term care insurance. As brokers, they represent numerous companies in the industry, ensuring that their clients get the best products at the most cost-effective rate. What sets Set for Life Insurance apart? You'll enjoy special discounts, priority underwriting handling, and even exceptions in the underwriting process. So why wait? Contact Set for Life Insurance today and let them be your insurance partner for life. Visit their website at www.setforlifeinsurance.com or call them toll-free at 1-888-553-3559. Welcome back to Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. If you caught our last episode, you know that we had an incredible conversation with the one and only Dr. Nisha Mehta about her journey from radiologist to entrepreneur, advocate, and community builder. Today, we're continuing that conversation and diving into the financial side of things, how physicians can build security, prepare for a potential recession, and use side gigs, and also our W-2 income for empowerment. Let's get back to it. Here's part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Nisha Mehta. Oh my gosh, you've hit so many amazing points. You're doing so many great things with the presence you've built by writing about it, by creating a space for people to gather and share their experiences, and then leveraging that into advocacy for making physician and patient lives better and innovating to do the same. And I'm just in awe of how much you've done from like where you started to where you've come now. Obviously, this probably wasn't easy. You weren't an entrepreneur before you started and you sort of fell into it. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the pain points that you encountered and how you got past them in order to keep growing.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably like a whole hour in and of itself. I guess the TLDR is that I don't think anything prepares you for being an entrepreneur, right? And the only thing that you need to realize is everyone's a critic. There's no right way to do things. And there's always going to be people that want more of you, whether that is yourself wanting more of yourself, whether that's your family wanting more of you, your job wanting more of you, the people that you are serving with your entrepreneurial stuff wanting more of you. And I think for me, that's been the hardest challenge, right? Like there's just not enough hours in a day. And so learning to set boundaries, which is something that I think I don't know, at least for me, does not come naturally. And I think for me, that was the hardest part of my first few years doing this because I wanted to do everything. I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I didn't know how to say no. And so, when I was working full time as a physician and building this business, it was like I would wake up every morning at 5 or 6 just to try to get some stuff done before I left for work. Then I'd get the boys ready, take them to school, go to work, come back, be with the boys until they went to bed, try to spend some time with my husband. Fortunately for me, he's a surgeon and he's an early to bed, early to rise. So he would go to bed around 10. And then I'd be like, okay, now time to start this other job that I've decided to put on myself. Right. And so, for the first few years of all of this, it was literally like my husband would wake up in the morning and he'd be upstairs working out and sending me podcasts on the importance of sleep. And, because he'd have seen me like face planted on my computer when he woke up in the morning. And he's like, this is not healthy. Like, you can't do this. You're shaving off like years of your life. And he was sort of like, and like I said, this was not intentional pathway down entrepreneurship, right? So we hadn't monetized anything. So I was just kind of doing it because I was really passionate about what we were building and the movement that I was seeing. And I think when we hit 15,000 members, my husband was like, you need to shut this thing down. Like, he is like, this is crazy. It is taking over your life. Like, and you're stressed about it all the time and you don't get any downtime. Like, all your free time is taken up by this. Like, just stop. and then I had a decision to make, right? Like I was like, well, now I feel like I'm failing at everything, right? Like I'm not as present as I am at home, or I should be at home. I'm not like, when I'm at work, I'm stressed about when I'm going to come home and do the work that I have to do for the business. When I'm like with the boys, I'm also kind of thinking in one head about like, maybe today they'll go to bed early, so I'll have a little more time to work. And it was like, I just couldn't enjoy anything. Right. And so I think for me, that was the hardest part of just figuring out, like, how do I keep all these pieces together so that I don't ruin my life trying to pursue this thing that I'm really passionate about. And so, and I think that's when things kind of took a turn for like, okay, you know what? Like, I don't need to be the one who's verifying if every single person on this platform is a doctor. I could hire somebody to do that, right? Like, I don't need to be messaging people and asking them for proof that they're physicians. And so, in order to be able to pay for people to do those things, I was like, okay, now I have to generate some revenue so I can pay somebody else to do things. And so that was kind of the first thing, was getting comfortable with this idea that I was now going to turn this into a business when it was never intended to be a business. But when I did that and we took on our first few sponsors, and I was able to hire some people to help, all of a sudden I realized I can now focus on the things that I actually really like about this, right? Instead of like verifying physicians and getting in the middle of fights between members or this and that, I can spend my time actually like creating content and listening to what it is that they need and trying to find them resources for those things. So that was kind of the first thing, was just getting comfortable with the idea that I was going to even run a business, because that was never the intention. And then once that happened, then it was sort of like, as the groups grew, like nowadays, I'm very comfortable saying no. But like, I hated it then. Like every time somebody would message me and be like, we don't like this about how you run, blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, what can I change? Whatever. And I was like, you know what? Like, these people don't need to be on call 24/7 for this community. They come in, they join for free. And then like, they want all these things. But at the end of the day, it's my job to make it sustainable, right? And so I need boundaries and I need rules that like our moderators can enforce, so that I don't have to get involved in just, this is what it is. Like, it's a free community. If you don't like it, then, maybe it's just not the best fit. But it's not my job to like be everything that everybody wants me to be. And it's not possible. And I think that was the other thing, was just like realizing like there are some things that are just not possible, right? Like when you put 200,000 people, that's like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 football stadiums worth of people. Like there's no chance that everybody there is going to like me and like the way that I do things. And I think I needed to get comfortable with that, because I was like such a people pleaser before then. And I was kind of like, you know what? Like at the end of the day, I can only do what I know how to do well. And, if I'm providing value and if people see that, they stay. And if they don't see that, there's other people that will provide value for them. But like, I just can't be everything to everyone. And that was a really, like, for me, that was like multiple years of kind of like, am I comfortable with that? Am I not comfortable with that? And there's still times now where I'm like, you want to be challenged, because you want to like challenge your assumptions and make sure that you feel comfortable with how you're doing things. But then you also have to get to a point where you're like, you know what, you're not going to be perfect and you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And you have to learn to like deal with criticism. I think the type A in all of us is like, well, why can't I do it perfectly? And just realizing like, you're just never going to be able to do anything perfectly. But the only thing that you can do is continue to try to improve and try to do things better. And so I think for me, those were the biggest challenges, was really just kind of like getting comfortable in my own skin and saying like, this is what I am. This is what I'm not. This is what I can take away from my family. This is what I can't take away from my family. And like, and as the kids got older, I think it was like, it became a little bit easier for me to just kind of say like, this is where I need to be right now. And this is where I can't be right now. And those priorities just got sharper and sharper in terms of what I wanted for our lives. And that made it a little bit easier to start learning to say no for the other things. But, all of this is a process. And I think that's what people don't realize. Like they want to start a business and they want everything to be perfect right from the beginning. And it's sort of like, you're going to evolve. Your visions are going to evolve about like what you want at different stages. And you just have to be comfortable with pivoting at every stage. And, I think the doctor in me was sort of like, I want the blueprint and I want to follow it. And it's going to like, and I just realized like, there is no blueprint. You just kind of go with things as they happen and you do the best you can at each step. And you got to give yourself a little grace when you don't do it perfectly, and just say like, okay, at the end of the day, do I feel like it's better that what I'm doing is out there, or should it just not exist at all? And if the answer is if it's better, then you just keep trying to make it better and not worry about the things that you aren't doing. So yeah, I think those are like, for me, it's been a really big sort of personal process of figuring out like, where are my priorities? What is the impact I want to make? Like, is it advocacy? Is it health tech? Is it, community building? Is it, and sometimes those things are all like, and on great days, they all line up super synergistically and you can kind of put them all in together. And on other days, it's like, okay, I got to make a decision. Like I've got this many hours and, this senator can only meet at this time. And that means I can't do X, Y, and Z. And it just is what it is. So.
Well, I think that's really insightful. I mean, having to deal with criticism and people not liking you, I think is the worst part of having a public position. And how you put it there, and that you have to just decide that it's okay that certain people don't like you, as long as you can continue to do the work that you need to do, and the work that you believe in order to, in order to make that happen, sometimes you have to say no. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people pleasing doctors have a tough time with. So, I think that's so insightful. And thank you for sharing that. Sounds like you're doing fantastic work. What's next for PSG and physician community? What are you working on right now?
So in theory, we are starting a podcast in a month.
Okay.
I don't know if that will actually come to fruition. Again, best laid plans. I've learned to just kind of roll with it, but that's something that everyone's been asking for, is some audio format to what things are. People are asking for a lot more in person, and so we're working alongside other conferences to be able to bring some opportunities for doctors to be able to get together. I've never wanted to be an organizer of an event, and so this is a good way for us to kind of give people the in-person interactions that they want without me having to be the one that's planning those sorts of things. And so that's new. We just started a newsletter. So we're just kind of, I think one of the big things is Facebook is great, except it's got some limitations. And so really just trying to, our website has developed out a lot more recently. We write a lot more articles. We put out a lot more content. And so for us, it's really just kind of making sure that we can meet people where they're at. Residents and fellows are a very different group of people, and just making sure, and we've got such a wide range of people in our communities, right? With the number of people that we have, it's like you've got retirees and you've got people that are just starting out their careers, and really just trying to make sure that we're addressing what everybody wants out of the communities. So yeah, I think for us, it's really just been kind of listening carefully to what would be helpful to people, and then trying to get those resources together for them.
That's amazing. Now let's pivot to the financial empowerment side of your platforms. You have started creating not started, but have been creating a lot of content about finances. And recently, there has been a lot of concern in the physician community about a potential looming recession. And what are the markets doing? Are they going to continue to tank? What is your take on how physicians can handle this potential threat of a looming recession?
I mean, it's hard, right? Because a lot of us have never seen a real recession, right?
Mm.
We've been fortunate to have had a decade now where we haven't had the sort of like real sustained dip that previous generations of physicians may have seen. And so I think it is causing a lot of anxiety for people, right? Because you're used to, oh, my portfolio is going to go up a certain percent every year, and this is what my growth is going to be. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like these numbers are not as big as I thought they were. And maybe they're even negative, right?
Right.
And so that is a real feeling of like, should I have even contributed to my retirement account? All I did was lose money, right? And you're just like, no, like, and so I think there is this need on everyone's side to realize like that staying the course is really, you're in it for the long run. You're not in it for 1 year. You're not in it for 2 years. Like you don't want to be worried about what the market is doing on a daily basis. You're saying over 10 years, over 20 years, over 30 years, historically, what has the market done? And the market has always gone up. And so, making sure that people aren't trying to time the market, they aren't trying to sell in a panic. Those are really important things because I forget what the quote is. I think it's a Peter Lynch quote. And he says something along the lines of like, far more money has been lost in people trying to prepare for recessions or corrections, or I forget what the exact quote is, than has actually been lost in the corrections themselves, right? And I think that's a valid point, right? If you're not touching that money next year, you don't need to worry about what's happening to that money next year. You continue on your financial plan, you continue to invest, and it's really just the people that are nearing retirement or who have a major expense that's coming up that need to start really thinking about, well, how am I going to address cash flow issues if for some reason money is not coming in as steadily? But for better or for worse, I mean, doctors don't do really much better during times of booms, and they don't do much worse during times of recession. So if you're planning on practicing and you're going to bring in that steady paycheck, there's not that much that needs to change other than that you need to stay calm, right? And if you talk to older generations of physicians, I mean, for me, like my dad is always like, recessions are the best times for doctors, right? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And it's not that you're making more money, but it's that relative to everyone else, you have more stability. And to some degree, I think that's right? Like when 2008, 2012 kind of happened, we were in residency, and it was like, actually in New York City, we got this sweet apartment that we never could have been able to afford. But the landlord literally was like, you guys are residents. We know you have steady jobs. And everyone in New York was freaking out and losing jobs. And they were like, you can have this apartment for the next 3 years, and we're not going to raise the rent. And we got this literally 50% on the rent because people just wanted people with stability. And my dad has always said that he's made more money in recession times, right? Because people are more willing to give him special terms on investments because, there's not as many people that can put down money, for example. Right. And so, right, like he could say, well, if I'm going to give you money for this project, I want a 16% return instead of a 10% return, right? Like you've got all this leverage now because capital is tight. And as a physician, you know that you are still going to have your steady salary no matter what. So that's one of the really nice things about being a doctor is having that regular, consistent cash flow. And so you just need to strategize on how you want to do that. Do you want to stay the course? Do you want to be that person who's buying the dips? Is this actually a buying opportunity for you that you'll be really happy that you had, right? Like I think people that were able to buy at the bottom in 2008 are very happy with what has happened with that money. I know for us, like when the pandemic hit, we were able to pour money into the market then, and that money nearly doubled by the end of the year, right? So I think those are things to remember is like you actually might have really good opportunities to make investments, whether that be in real estate, whether that be in the market, whether that be in lending or helping another business kind of make it through that recession. You're in a position to be able to supply cash for those situations, and that can actually be really advantageous to you. So I think if you have extra cash above and beyond what you normally invest, then being able to deploy that in the setting of a recession can actually be really important. One of the things I do think that a lot of physicians should consider when you're going into a recession is really, is this a time to be reducing debt a little bit just to be able to address some of the larger expenses that you might have, right? Because there might be times of pullbacks. Typically, private practices don't suffer that much, but it depends, of course, on what your line of work is, right? So for example, my husband's a plastic surgeon. If there was a recession, I have no doubt that, that's something that people are going to cut out of their budget to some degree. And so, yeah, maybe your cash flow is going to go down a little bit. So how are you accounting for that if it might hit your practice? But this is, again, where I think side gigs are so great, right? Not to be like a super side gig aficionado here, but, diversifying your income streams and trusting that when one thing goes down, another thing will be there to kind of back it up is really important. And so I think for people that are thinking about when and if a recession happens, and if for some reason, especially as things become more corporate, maybe, even though people still need to see doctors, maybe the hospital systems are going to say hey, we're not giving you X, Y, and Z this year. Or we're actually going to have to cut your salary this year. We saw a lot of that during the beginning of the pandemic where people were sort of very concerned about what their cash flow might look like. And a lot of practices actually stopped giving distributions and bonuses and things like that just to be able to hold on to cash. And so if you see that situation happening, how are you preparing for a potential either delay or even cut back in some of what your earnings might be. And I think that's where having, these extra things, whether it be a consulting gig that you've picked up or a real estate property that's able to churn out some income, or are you diversifying your practice's income streams, right, to address that? So a lot of people, when times are good, are just happy to kind of keep doing the same old, but is there a revenue stream in your practice that you haven't thought about? Like, do you have some unused office space that you could actually end up renting out, or do you have another ancillary income stream that's product sales or something else that could actually be very synergistic with what your practice is? And is there a way that you could bring that in? So I think those are the kinds of things that doctors should be thinking about always, because this isn't the time to prepare for a recession. Is not when the recession hits, right? It's beforehand. What are you doing to your life to make it recession proof? And I think that those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure that you're just understanding what your investment horizon is, your expense horizon is, what are the major expenses you're going to have over the next few years, how are you preparing for having that like cash holding, so I think like beefing up your emergency funds if you think that there's going to be a recession, so that you don't have to liquidate assets when they're down, is really important. So I know for people that are closer to the end of their careers, or even people that are retired, right, that's one thing that we're always saying, like, just stop putting money into the market right now. If you're already at retirement and you've already set up enough that you need for retirement, just like maybe sit on a little bit more cash than what you're used to, because you don't want to be in a position where you're having to sell at a point where you either have to pay a high amount of capital gains because they're short-term capital gains, or when you're actually having to say like, hey, we have no choice. We have this buy-in for our practice, and now we've got to come up with $200,000, and we're going to have to sell this portfolio holding. That can really ding your trajectory going forward, right? It's small things that compound over a long period of time. So you don't want to take those losses if you don't have to. So just kind of sitting down and saying, what do I think my major expenses are going to be over the next 5 years, say, and do I have enough money to be able to cover those things without dipping into my actual investment holdings and having to liquidate assets. So yeah, it's always good to be prepared, but at the end of the day, like, the sky is not falling. This happens every, cycle, and people survive it every time. And just having a level head about it, I think, is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think matching your investment horizon and your savings goal with the investment vehicle can sometimes make these decisions easier. For example, if you're saving up for a down payment in a year or a practice buy-in in a couple of years, maybe you don't want to be putting that in the market right now. But if you're saving for retirement and for a 20 to 30-year goal, then this recession is no big deal at all, right? In fact, it's an opportunity. I think what you said is fantastic. Let's wrap up with a fun rapid fire segment that we like to have with all of our guests. And this is a totally off the cuff, but we will not hold you to these answers forever and ever. Just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. So you ready? What's the best money habit you've ever adopted?
Saving first, pay yourself first is, I think, so important, right? And from the very beginning of when we started earning money, we've just always been really disciplined about not cheating on how much we put into savings, and making sure we maxed our retirement accounts. And that was painful at times, where like we did have to sort of say no to ourselves a lot at the beginning for things that we wanted to do, but being responsible about that, really, 10 years later, has really given us a lot of peace of mind now that was definitely worth it.
That's awesome. Now let's shift gears to managing a Facebook group. Which is your least favorite type of post to see pop up in your group?
I think for us, it's like the billboard type posts that, come join my webinar, come do this, come do that. And it's sort of like, okay, guys, like, I understand it's super important to you, but can you imagine if 200,000 people were posting that?
All the time.
It would be a lot. So for us, it's that's just a hard one for me, because I understand the intention for the person who's posting it, but it's hard for them to see the viewpoint of the 200,000 people on the other side that are going to see it. And so
Right.
navigating that in a way that is tactful, but also preserves what we want the group to feel like, is a hard one for me.
Yeah, absolutely. What is an underrated side gig for physicians?
my favorite side gigs are the arts, or the very creative ones. And I feel like, the ones that get all the glamour are the ones with the guaranteed, $600 an hour or this or that. But I feel like from a just fulfillment perspective and that's so cool perspective, it's all the creative, like the people who create products. It's the people who, are just so talented and sing or do other things that maybe aren't financially lucrative, but just totally fill your cup. Those are my favorites.
Oh yeah, totally. What's one piece of financial advice you'd give your younger self?
I think I would tell myself to chill just a little bit on the savings. I think, it's funny, right? You come out of residency and you're just in such a scarcity mentality. And for us, we were living in New York City, which we could not afford. And we had a kid, which we definitely could not afford. And so we were just so used to this mentality of do we need to take the subway and spend the $2 or should we just walk down this way? And we were just in such scarcity mode that I think it took a long time to come out of that. And so we probably waited to start spending money a little bit longer than we should. We probably took the live like a resident thing to an extreme. And of course, now we're enjoying the fruits of it, but we also didn't need to hit financial independence as early as we did. And I think we could have had a lot more fun in the process. So I think it's just balance with how quickly, realizing that you're going to get there eventually is also important, and enjoying the process is important.
Just so we can admire your milestone, when did you hit financial independence? How old were you?
I was in my 30s, which is pretty early. We had the good fortune of having interest rates on our student loans that were only 2%, which is not the reality of most people. And so our student loans didn't take as long to pay off as some other people's might. And then, we had two physicians who were working full time in relatively high paying specialties, as well as, we got involved in real estate really early. And that was it's been a good decade for real estate. And so there were a few things that kind of came together to really help us. So yeah, I was in my late 30s when we hit financial independence.
And also you saved way too much money, as you just said.
And I saved too much money. So, yeah. And like I said, there was no need. We love what we do. We're not looking to retire. So we really, I do think we could have delayed that process and still have had some, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nisha, thank you.
It's a balance. Yeah. Everything in moderation.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and your advice and sharing with our audience what your journey has been like.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we got to chat.
Yes, me too. If someone wants to get in touch with you, I know you're a very busy woman, but if someone wanted to see more of what you're doing or follow you, where can they get in contact with you?
I think the best way to see things related to physician side gigs is on the website at physiciansidegigs.com. And if you want to see more of what I'm doing personally, LinkedIn is probably where I most actively post things about, my feelings on advocacy or health tech or any of those sorts of things. So
awesome. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it. Until next time, keep building your financial freedom, stay fabulous, and most importantly, stay frugal, y'all.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.